In the 6 months after the new V&A Museum in Dundee opened, 500,000 people walked through its doors. Those behind this project, the first V&A to be built outside London, were overwhelmed but not surprised. They'd felt all along that a signature building by the Japanese architect Kengo Kuma on Dundee's waterfront could trigger the regeneration of this city, spoiled by insensitive development in the 1960s. In Dundee's brave new world, people would come here to learn more about Scotland's design heritage in a structure that is itself a piece of design, a piece of art, with its own story.
So what I want to do is work with the community to respect the place and to learn something from the place. It's just a kind of conversation with the community, conversation with the place.
In Dundee, Kengo Kuma, the architect behind Tokyo's National Stadium for the 2020 Olympic Games, has produced a design for the V&A that is unique and uniquely challenging to build, jutting out into the River Tay alongside Discovery, the polar exploration ship built in Dundee, in which Scott and Shackleton sailed to the Antarctic in 1901. Discovery came home to Dundee for good in 1986, around the time Kengo Kuma first visited Scotland. His impression of the landscape, particularly the cliffs, stayed with him, and 30 years later it would influence his design of Scotland's newest building.
This project is very unique as it's sitting between water and the city, nature and artifact, and it's just a very, very unique location. We try to create the landform between nature and the city, and the cliff gave me many hints about the shape of the building. The cliff is showing the conversation between water and the land, and that conversation is naturally creating that the soft organic shape. So we try to adapt the shape of cliff into real building. And, it's not easy process to create that kind of shape, but finally by using the concrete bars, we could achieve that kind of organic effect. The first time I came to Dundee, this site was occupied some old buildings, old factory buildings, old warehouse buildings, and I couldn't see rivers from the site. But I saw the rivers from the bridge, and it's just so big, wide, and beautiful, and so we thought we should integrate that kind of beautiful river to the city. And the integration is the main theme of this project.
The new V&A is part of a £1 billion master plan to reconnect Dundee city centre with its waterfront, a connection that was severed in the 1960s by roads and other unsympathetic development. There's much talk of Kengo Kuma's building having the same effect in Dundee in 2018 as Frank Gehry's Guggenheim had in Bilbao in 1997. But the challenge to turn around Scotland's fourth largest city, beset by growing unemployment after industry wound down in the 1980s, is very great. The council says it will take 30 years. The V&A is just the start.
Up until we had set out the waterfront master plan, it was an area that was effectively cut off from Dundonians because of a sort of mini motorway system with overhead pedestrian bridges and quite brutal architecture. So what we've done is to sweep all of that away, put in a very simple and robust gridiron pattern of streets, very much a European tradition, and at its heart we have a major green open space, Slessor Gardens. We've put in a new railway station as an entry point into the city, and what's coming next are all of the mixed-use developments, the apartments, the offices, the hotels, that will create that buzz and bring the whole area to life. So it's important that the V&A Museum sits within that living piece of city.
In 2014, Dundee was made a UNESCO City of Design after a concerted push by the council to get the city onto the cultural map. But it was a chance conversation that landed the V&A.
The idea for the museum came from a visit to Dundee by Mark Jones, the then director of the V&A in South Kensington. He'd been invited to see the work in our College of Art, and invited by the University of Dundee. And during the day we had an informal lunch while he was in the city, and a few people were also invited. I was one of the people invited to that lunch. And over the meal we spoke about regeneration and the importance of the arts and culture and creativity in regeneration. And it was a very nice lunch and a very nice discussion. But afterwards I took Mark on a tour of Dundee waterfront, and he became very interested in what we were doing. But we thought maybe that was just that. That was the end of the day. But afterwards Mark said, look, I'd like you to come down to London. I've got an idea. I think we can work together.
The Victoria and Albert Museum in London identified hundreds of items that spoke of Scottish design through the ages. These would form the basis of the new museum's exhibitions. But the man who would take responsibility from day one was determined that V&A Dundee would be a hub for the artists and designers of today.
I do think it's absolutely right that Scotland should have a design museum. We have an amazing creative heritage in this country amongst our artists, our sculptors, and very much with our designers. In working in this project, it's been a revelation to me quite how extraordinary our history is in design creativity, and through that in entrepreneurship and innovation.
Philip Long came here from a post in the National Galleries of Scotland. When he arrived in 2011, Kengo Kuma's plans for the building were controversial, not because of the design, but because of the cost. The new director put it back on track by reducing the extent to which the museum sat out in the River Tay.
The project had great ambitions very, very early on, and all of the shortlisted designs did attempt to place the building out over the river. In 2012, the project team looked at that, and I think we recognised quite what a challenge that would be. So the very sensible decision was taken to pull it back onto land, but not completely onto land. There's still a substantial amount of the building that does project out into the river, and I think that's one of the things that makes it not only exciting to look at and to visit, but conceptually makes it very important, because Kuma's design vitally reconnects Dundee, the city, with Dundee's river, the River Tay.
But the design remained the same: two inverted pyramids with double-curved concrete walls, to which would be attached 2,500 concrete planks of different sizes. Kengo Kuma's cliff. Kengo Kuma was born in Yokohama in 1954, less than 10 years after the Americans had brought the Second World War to an end by exploding 2 atom bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Elsewhere, wartime bombing had decimated Japan's wooden buildings.
In Japan, the wood was a most important material, and so we thought wood was oldest friend of us, and the softness of the wood and intimacy of the wood was creating our culture itself. In 20th century, unfortunately, the concrete culture civilizations came to Japan, and we lost the warmness of wood. And but now the people are going back to wood. It's happening everywhere in the world, not only in Japan, and we are doing everywhere in the world. Because people really want to live with nature, really want to feel nature, and wood is the best material to give that kind of softness.
Kuma's aim in Japan was to recover the place. In the mountainous town of Usahara, he's returned again and again to design a wooden bridge-shaped art gallery, a community market, and 2 hotels, as well as the town's offices. They call this place the town above the clouds, and Kuma clearly sees it as a showcase for his philosophy. Collaborate with the community and with local architects, use natural materials, work with the hand.
In 1990s, because of the economic crisis in Japan, we didn't do project in Tokyo, and then we went to countryside, and we realized some very small project with a craftsman, local craftsman, with local material, and I learned many things from those experiences, and after 2000. We began to work in the big cities. We began to work in other countries, and we tried to adapt the method we learned from the small village in Japan to bigger scale. But the material is different, scale is different, but the basic attitude to the place is consistent.
He's experimented with exporting Japanese design, a Japanese garden in Oregon, a tea pavilion in Vancouver. He's designing an aquatic centre in Copenhagen, and of course, the Olympic Stadium. At the National Stadium, Kuma has not only used latticed wood on the outside, he's brought nature inside by putting trees and planting along the circulation spaces on every level, continuing a Japanese tradition of linking landscape and interior. Now, a Kengo Kuma design is being built in Scotland, his first project in the UK. A cofferdam has been built to allow the building into the river. The walls, precast off-site, are being installed, and the builders and the engineers have their work cut out.
What we can see here is the beginnings of the building emerging from the ground. The line of the bars, the way that they twist, shows you already how acute the walls will be and what the overhang will be. Dramatic, isn't it? Very dramatic sight.
It's not lost on Kengo Kuma or Philip Long that the V&A in Dundee, the home of a design museum, is a piece of design itself.
The building is quite a remarkable one. I think we're very proud to have a museum which sets out its design credentials quite so clearly. Kengo Kuma has designed us a fabulous building, which I think invites people to think about how design works. How do we get from the idea of what a building might be through to its realisation? Everything from the spaces in the museum that are fabulously designed for showing great design, through to how the building itself is revealed through its structure. I'm sure it will be of great interest to designers and architects and engineers to come and see.
The building is a technical challenge. New 3D software had to be created to render out the shape, software that would later be used on the Olympic Stadium in Tokyo.
The complex geometry of this building, the requirement for very, very fine tolerances down to 1 or 2 millimetres in three-dimensional space meant that we had to use a completely different way of setting out the building. If you were watching the workmen working on it, you would have thought that they were always on their mobile phones. They weren't on their mobile phones. That was the GPS system to work out exactly where they were in three-dimensional space so that they could work to that very, very fine tolerances that the whole engineering of the building demanded.
Philip Long says nothing in his career really prepared him for a project of this scale, or for showing it to famous faces.
And where we're standing, the sea will return right up to the front of the building.
Wow. You can really start to see what it's going to be like when it's finished, and how complex it is.
He once wanted to be an architect, like his father before him, who worked for Sir Basil Spence, the designer of Coventry Cathedral.
The architecture is in my family's blood, and so is naval architecture, in fact, further back. In the end, I trained as a sculptor and as an artist and as a designer, so I think all of these things, I hope, has helped me be sympathetic to the process of the complexity of the design and construction of this museum, but I very much hope as well that it helps me be sympathetic to all of the designers that we now are very much looking forward to in the museum. Now, the museum is showing our heritage, and it is also showing new work. We want to work with designers to commission new works, to give opportunities for them.
But before Scottish designers can display their work, the team behind this ambitious project has to deliver the vision of Kengo Kuma. The materials that will mark out the new V&A as a building of distinction are arriving in Dundee. It's 2 years before completion, and the design is testing the contractors.
This is our first delivery of precast planks that will be going on this sample panel. So each plank follows the curvature of the wall as well, so each plank's unique. We've got 20 different elevations and external facade walls. So as you're walking into the new V&A, you'll see all this concrete stepping in and out of the walls.
I've been involved as an architect, a designer and a project manager for 30 years in delivering building projects. And this is without doubt the pinnacle of those 30 years. And living in Dundee and sensing the excitement and engagement of the public with the building as it comes out of the ground is also very exciting. Whereas your average building is a very traditional frame, very simple, straightforward. The design of this has required engineering, sculptural techniques that are traditional in that it's concrete and it's formwork, but to actually build that structure in its temporary state requires very, very creative engineering.
I never ever thought I'd get the opportunity to work on that type of building. The complexities of it drive us every day to stretch our imaginations. It's just a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The external walls that you see the red and yellow formwork, all that formwork actually holds up the structure until all the floors are in place and the roof's in place. And once the roof's in place, the structure itself takes over. Following on from that, the precast panel planks that are going to be positioned on the external elevations will start to appear, and people then will see the design concept come to life.
And all the while, Kengo Kuma is flying in to keep an eye on his first project in Britain.
Working with Kuma-san has been really uplifting because he's very much against star architecture, but he is obviously now a very, very well-known name. And he brought an attitude to the building which was very much about setting it in its place. So it's not just here to be some kind of iconic landmark, it has meaning in its place. And also we found that, as with any building project, there are always problems that crop up with the design. And he always took a problem and improved the building in resolving that problem. And I don't think I've ever seen any architect consistently do that on a project that's certainly I've been involved in.
It's taken 4 years. It's challenged the people who built it, all those walls on the slope. But most of all, the way it juts out into the River Tay, less than originally intended, but still prominent, all achieved by holding back the water in that specially built dam. Finally, away comes the cofferdam, and Kengo Kuma's design is revealed. It's a long way from the wooden buildings of Usahara.
I think that, you know, some of his earlier projects are like little jewel boxes, but I think that's where he honed his craft in terms of materiality. And I think, you know, this building, as large as it is, has, you know, a lot of its appeal is about the use of materials, particularly natural materials. The exterior of the building, if you had said to people, well, it's a concrete building, that's not the way they perceive the building at all. It's using that material in a way which is perhaps unexpected and really impressive.
As you might expect from a museum team, the story of the V&A in Dundee was carefully curated. The exterior of the building was there for all to see, emerging on the waterfront. But the interior remained a secret right up to the day it was opened. It's opening week. Kengo Kuma is here, and it's press day. The world will see, at last, the interior of the V&A Dundee.
It's been remarkable working with Kengo Kuma. I think his sensitivities to what the requirements of a museum are in the 21st century are really remarkable and are becoming clearer to us every day. Is so thoughtful to how visitors might like to experience a museum. As one walks into it, it seems to unfold in front of you, and you seem to slow down as you look around it and up through it, through the windows that are provided throughout the space that gives you fantastic views across the city. Kengo Kuma seems to be brilliant at making an architecture which interplays, if you like, with the surroundings round about. That's very important for the site here. And as a creator of a museum that makes spaces that are absolutely right for showing objects in, that works brilliantly too.
Here are Kengo Kuma's trademarks. The use of natural materials, fins, this time in oak, the editing of light, views over the water, and the idea that it's possible in a masonry building to achieve a certain lightness.
We did use the beautiful oak as a wall of the foyers, and also we tried to find the unique solution for fixing the wooden panels to the wall. And we tried to create a kind of randomness, and randomness is very important for nature. And as we tried to go beyond the geometry of the building. The normal museum as a cut as exterior and interior, but this museum, so we try to create connection between exterior and interior.
Kengo Kuma was really keen that the wood panel relates to one's own body and to that sense of scale which anybody can understand and anybody can really enjoy. So it's a building which unfolds for you as you walk into the museum, and it unpacks for you. So as a visitor, that you don't feel intimidated, you feel welcomed, and you can chart your own path, which I think is a really exciting prospect for anybody coming into this museum.
In his work, Kengo Kuma has always attached importance to the void, in this case the central exhibition space, and to that very Chinese and Japanese concept, Zen.
The void is a very important concept for the Japanese building, and it's very much related with the Zen. Zen creates a special atmospheres where people can feel essence of nature, and void is the best solution for that kind of space. The big foyer is a good example of void, and also the space between two blocks, that void in the center of the building is to connect the nature and human.
I think the building that Kengo Kuma has given the city is a wonderful living room for the city, and he means that in the most fundamental sense. And that living room for the city, we're standing in the main hall now, we're surrounded by warm wood panelling, which is a wonderful invitation to a different kind of museum, which is a museum for everybody to enjoy. And that warm welcome to the world of design is something that has infiltrated every part of the programme that we do. So yes, we have a wonderful opening exhibition on ocean liners, but we also have permanent collection galleries telling the story of Scottish design for the very first time, project spaces, a designer in residence. We've got lots of workshops, talks, events. We've got really something something for everybody.
When Kengo Kuma first saw Scotland 30 years ago, he was fascinated by the scenery, but he also wanted to see the buildings designed by the Scottish architect Charles Rennie Mackintosh, especially the Glasgow School of Art. Fast forward 30 years, and 3 months before the opening of the V&A in Dundee, Mackintosh's landmark building has been destroyed by fire for the second time. Mackintosh looms large in the new V&A. The famous tea room interiors he designed for Miss Cranston have been taken out of storage and installed here, a poignant tribute to one of Scotland's most acclaimed designers.
If you were to ask me what I'm most proud of in this overall development, it's certainly the museum, the new institution, the team that's come into place to develop it. But I think I am especially proud of the conservation and restoration of this original tea room by Charles Rennie Mackintosh. It was designed by him for Miss Cranston at the height of Mackintosh's powers in 1907, operated as a tea room to the 1950s, and then in 1970 it was pulled out of its original building and taken into storage. When we set about developing our design history galleries here, we wanted to represent Mackintosh in a very special way. And so we've worked hard with colleagues in Glasgow and with the City Council here to bring back to life this original tea room interior that people can now see after some 50 years.
The tea room is right at the heart of the Scottish Design Galleries and is really right at the heart of the museum. Kengo Kuma came 30 years ago to Scotland looking at Mackintosh buildings because he was interested in that avant-garde nature of Mackintosh's work, but also that really warm welcome that he gives to people when you walk into those spaces. And I defy anybody not to be absolutely bowled over when they walk into the Ingram Street tea room, which is the tea room that we have right at the centre of the building. We've worked in partnership with Glasgow Life and Dundee City Council to realise this extraordinary interior, which will be a total surprise for visitors when they come to the museum. We're a brand new museum. We've got a lot to learn, and we've got the perfect building and perfect framework within which to do that. I've worked on many interesting projects, but this has to really top everything. I think to be part of a brand new 21st century design museum is the most exciting prospect, and a museum which really defines the way that objects are displayed, conversations are had, and the way people enjoy and encounter design within a museum context. It can't get better than this.
From Charles Rennie Mackintosh to the Scottish designers of our time, this is a new showcase. A showcase that is instantly attractive not only to Dundonians, but also to people from all over Scotland who come for the opening celebrations and then keep on coming and coming. 500,000 in the first 6 months. They include the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. The Duchess has just become patron of the V&A. Now, Kengo Kuma's design gets royal approval.
I have been amazed by the breathtaking architecture and the sheer range of design on display. But most of all, I've been moved by the passion of the people who work here and the dedication of all those who've helped make this important project succeed. I'm pleased to declare V&A Dundee officially open.
It was to have cost £45 million. It ended up costing £80 million. But those involved say the value of the V&A to Dundee is incalculable. Will it become as famous as Charles Rennie Mackintosh's Glasgow School of Art? Will it do for Dundee what Frank Gehry's Guggenheim did for Bilbao? Only time will tell.
A building is nothing until it comes alive, and it's how people interact with that building and how that building influences their behaviour and their mood and their futures. So I've got great hopes for this building in terms of what it will do for the importance of design in Dundee, design in Scotland, and design to every person that comes into the building. They need to understand that everyone, in a way, is a designer.
Next time. In New York, one of the biggest developments in the country's history has chosen Thomas Heatherwick to design its centrepiece. Inspired by the stepwells of India, the vessel has been built in Italy, shipped across the Atlantic, and erected on Manhattan's west side. It's cost $150 million. It's been a hit with the selfie generation, and it goes nowhere.
In a sense, we try to be very idealistic and think, what's the best thing that we really think should happen here? In the development team's mind originally was that there would be a sculpture. Of course, identity is done with a sculpture, and in the studio we've been interested in trying to break down the idea that there's a functional world and then there's culture, and that they're two separate things, and that aesthetics and function are two separate things. To us, how a place makes you feel is its function.